Overtime was created by Matt Holman, founder of the EMW Foundation, and is made possible by the Prodigy Media Group and RPM Athlete Performance. With inspirational credit to my friend, Dr. Fred Opie. Welcome to Overtime, an open conversation series on racism in the sport of lacrosse. We hope you find this thought-provoking, educational, and it leaves you better prepared as a member of the lacrosse community. Thanks again for joining us, and now for this week's panel. All right, welcome. Tonight's show features women's coaches. This is episode 5 of Overtime. I'm Matt Holman, your host, and I'm going to welcome in our panelists here. First, we have Zoe Pekins. Zoe first experienced the game in middle school in the rec league, which led her to joining the high school at Hammond High School in Columbia, Maryland, her freshman year. She's a 2020 graduate of University of Maryland, Baltimore County, with a degree in Media and Communication Studies and a minor in Social Welfare. She's the current area manager for Amazon KWI, which is Amazon Air, and coach of the Howard County 2023 girls team. So welcome, Zoe. Katherine Simmons, product of Alexandria, Virginia. Kat began playing at the age of 8 in 3rd grade. This led her to play on both the NCAA and club teams at San Diego State University, where she graduated in 2016 with a degree in interdisciplinary studies. Kat coaches at Rancho Bernardo High School and a San Diego club coach. And she's also a proud mother. Tari Kandemiri, Hi, Tari. Born and raised in Silver Spring, Maryland, Tari began playing at age 14. She's a 2018 computer science graduate of the University of the South. She's a consultant now living in Atlanta, a U.S. Lacrosse Sankofa clinician, and one of the top lacrosse social media personas, known as Official Lax Girl. We have a superstar in our midst.
Barely.
Next, we have Holly McGarvie Reilly. Hi, Coach Holly. She is a softball convert. Holly began playing at age 12 in Medford, New Jersey. She went on to attend and play at Princeton, graduating in 2009 with a major in anthropology and environmental studies. Coach Reilly is the proud mom of 2 boys, ages 3 and 11 months. She's the Argentina women's team head coach, and she's the owner and director of Renegade Lacrosse, empowering female athletes to be confident people and players through youth lacrosse experience. Welcome, Holly. Next, we have Grayson Corbett. Gray was raised in Ellicott City, Maryland. She began playing in the 6th grade. She went on to attend and play at Hofstra University before transferring to UMBC, where she graduated in 2019. She was majoring in English. Currently, she's in the graduate program at UMBC. She's also an assistant coach with Harlem Lacrosse and volunteer assistant at UMBC. Next, we have a newlywed amongst us, Alyssa Murray-Cometti. Hi, Alyssa. Congrats again. Alyssa began playing at the age of 5 in West Babylon, New York. She is a 2014 graduate of Syracuse University, where she majored in Child and Family Studies. Alyssa is currently the program director for both the Iron Horse Girls Club and Vandergrift High School team in Austin, Texas region, excuse me. I just want to say Dallas for some reason. Next, we have Mira Shane. Hi, Mira. Mira grew up in Princeton, New Jersey. She started playing in 5th grade and moved to goalie in the 7th grade with an exclamation point. I like that. She is a 2019 graduate of the University of Michigan, majoring in African American Studies and minoring in law, justice, social change, and music. Currently the social media manager at Verb Energy. She's a member of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for the Intercollegiate Men's Lacrosse Coaches Association and the goalie coach at Harvard. And last but not least, we have Coach Meg Decker. Coach Decker grew up in Baltimore. She began playing in the 7th grade, but confesses that she wasn't any good until college. She spent 2 years at Navy and then transferred to Loyola University in Maryland, where she majored in psychology, graduating in 2011. She's the head coach for the University of Hartford, a newer NCAA Division I program. So I welcome you all. Happy evening. Hope you had a good 4th. And let's jump right into it. You all submitted some outstanding questions. I didn't even have to come up with any of my own, so this is really neat. We're going to try to get through these in the next hour or so, maybe over an hour. And first, I'll just throw out this general one. When is the first time you remember being aware of the lack of diversity in our sport? And anybody who wants to jump on that can just speak up.
I guess I can, I can take this one. So first, my mom's gonna watch this and I have to make a little fix on the bio. So I was born in Zimbabwe and then moved to the US when I was 7. But I've been in the US for like 16-ish years. So been here a while, very happy to be here. And
I didn't want to get that wrong. I knew you should clarify this morning.
Mama Kandemiri would be like, well, you made a small mistake and you didn't fix it, so. But
I don't mean any disrespect. We were communicating this morning, but I didn't ask her that specific question, so it's not her fault.
All good. I think the first time I realized kind of the lack of diversity, so Silver Spring is really diverse, you know, the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. There's a lot of, you know, immigrant people from all different backgrounds, but when we would go to other counties, so I was in Montgomery County, we'd go to, you know, Howard County to play, and I would notice that my team was really diverse. Our best player was African-American, but other programs didn't have that. So their roster was, you know, 95% white and maybe had an Asian player or Hispanic player. So when I first started playing, my assumption was, oh, like everyone looks like our team and, you know, everything's really diverse and it's going to be exactly carbon copy everywhere we go. But as I went to more quote unquote affluent areas in Maryland, I realized that wasn't the case. And I think that was my first real exposure to the differences that lacrosse really had.
Come on, don't be shy. I know we're just starting.
Yeah, I mean, I can absolutely agree with you. Me and Grayson are both from Howard County, and I've been playing Grayson since my freshman year of high school. And I think the first time I ever noticed a lack of diversity was from my mom, because she played lacrosse at Salisbury and she played soccer, and she was always like, she went to college 30 years ago and she was the only Black person on both teams and like across the board. And obviously growing up in Howard County, me and Grayson went to predominantly 50-50 Black, 50-50 white high schools. And then, so we didn't know any different until we played like Howard High School and like Marriott's Ridge and those schools that were mainly predominantly white. I think that's when I first noticed it, like besides my mom telling me. So.
Yeah, I'm just going off Zoe. I was thinking about this just because I think for me it was almost something like subconscious, because I couldn't really like pinpoint a time, because at my school that I was playing in, it was so diverse, at least my team. But then I noticed like some of my behaviors that at the time I think I just looked at as like being a teenage girl, but like I would straighten my hair before every one of my lacrosse games just because I wanted my hair braided like everyone else, or like game day hair and like those things. And it was like I wasn't like consciously realizing it, I don't think, but I think just I wanted to do what all my other teammates were like at club and stuff. And so like definitely during this time, like reflecting back, I was like, it's because no one else looked like me. Like I played against people like Zoe, and there were some girls, I think, I know Alex McKay was a year above me, but I just, looking back, I don't think a lot of the teams, I was lucky to be on a lot of diverse teams, but I don't think it was something that I like could pinpoint the time, but it was definitely there for sure.
Mine was probably when I was in high school. I went to a predominantly white private school, and probably the first time we were playing a school in our county, and it's a predominantly Black school, and it was my freshman year, and I just remember being like, wow, it was just really different for me, and that probably just freshman year of high school, I think, was when I really, because kind of like how Tari said, like, you kind of just assume the teams that you were playing on when you were younger, that was just what it was. And then you know, you get the experience to do that and you're like, wow, there really was that lack of diversity that we had. So that was eye-opening for me.
For me, I would say it was probably playing club lacrosse. I went to a fairly diverse high school. And when I say fairly, I think in hindsight, it wasn't as diverse as in my mind I thought it was. But playing on a club team, which was pretty much all white kids my age, and you think about the socioeconomic status and how much it costs to play travel lacrosse and all of that, definitely I'm sure played into that a bit. But yeah, I would say going from my high school to that was where I really noticed, and that's really where I got a first look at, real wealth. And, you get to know people that are in just a completely different category from your family. And so just opening my eyes to that and then kind of looking back and be like, my town's a little bit different from where these girls all grew up. But now, in hindsight, I'm like, my town isn't even as diverse as in my mind growing up I thought it was. I think about, I probably had majority white teammates with a few different minorities taking up some spots on the team, but in my mind, I was like, oh, we're diverse. So, just shows how much in hindsight you can see the lack of diversity now even more.
For me, it was actually college. I think that's the reality. And we had one Black player, and Princeton has a stronger minority population than where I went to high school. And so the takeaway for me was, why is that not represented on the university team? And that's because, those opportunities weren't necessarily afforded to players with that skin color. And then it was only further, I think, really going to me when I took a job in inner city Southeast DC and taught at Blue Senior High School. And obviously DC is considered a hotbed for lacrosse, but if you look at the breakdown, it's private schools. You've got Visitation, and we're talking DC metro area. You've got St. Stephen's. You've got really premier programs in the country, and yet there was one public school, and it was Woodrow Wilson. So we started the second public school team at Blue, and we were just trying to, they had never heard of the sport before, and it was really just eye-opening to me, and that was really the wake-up call, and also the reality that this sport has been exclusive really to wealthy individuals who were white.
Yeah, Holly, kind of jumping off of that. I think growing up in Princeton, I played basketball my whole life because my dad, who's Black, and my mom, who's white, my dad was the one that was all sports gung-ho, let's get a ball in her hand. And I was like, okay, let's go. I'm going to play basketball for mad long. And then 5th grade rolled around, or 6th grade, whenever I really got the stick in my hand, and it was this white camp counselor. And I brought it home, and I'll never forget my dad being like, bro, what is this? What is lacrosse? He grew up on the south side of Chicago. He was like, I literally have probably only ever seen it maybe on TV when he is wrecking ESPN. So I think that was the first time I've my dad, who's this sports guru in my mind. But as a Black male, it was just I'll throw baseballs at you and you can practice saving those. I'm not going to try to even throw with a stick. So I think, that was the first time that I kind of realized, oh, damn, there's definitely a discrepancy in what races are knowing this. And I almost felt conflicted in myself being biracial too, being should I go for basketball? Isn't that the plan? But then, when you stop growing at 5'5", plans kind of change for the better, obviously. But yeah.
For me, I grew up in the church a ton, and I grew up in Baltimore City. So most of my social interaction, I'm one of 8 kids. So the friends were your neighborhood. And we didn't travel too much. So we played backyard soccer pretty much all growing up. And then it wasn't until 7th grade where I stepped onto my first lacrosse field. And I was very confused because I looked around and I was like, we're missing something. a lot of somethings. And it was just odd to me that the field was all white, and it really was all 100% white. And Alyssa, to your point, it was the club scene. And I was very confused going home with a lacrosse stick and wanting to play with my friends in my neighborhood, and them not having lacrosse sticks and not knowing what it was and not wanting to play. And my older sister played in college, and she was the only reason that I kind of got into it or heard about it. But it wasn't in my neighborhood. It wasn't in my local area. There was no local like rec team where I grew up. And I was in Baltimore. Like, you think in Baltimore there's lacrosse everywhere, but it's not. I was about probably like a mile and a half from like the inner city, like inner harbor area. So South Baltimore. And like close to Catonsville High School. Do you guys, I don't know if any Marylanders know where that is. So Catonsville is pretty big with lacrosse, but I was just a little too far out of the circle towards the city that there wasn't anything there. So I remember like the very first time I stepped on lacrosse field, I was like, this is weird. My soccer field looks a lot different than this. And ever since then, I just, wanted something a little different than that.
You got to unmute yourself when you're trying to talk. I was really just listening to all of you ladies. So I like that. Here's another good one. I'll try to take us through these in some type of progression, but who can and/or how can we best educate people in positions of power within the game who are hesitant to speak about race-related issues? Just throw that as a discussion topic. So like who can speak about it, or how can we get them to speak about it? If you have any suggestions or any ideas.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is getting pro Black lacrosse athletes to be the ones who are the face and actually talking. Like, I know US Lacrosse has posted stuff by predominantly white athletes about what's going on. And I think growing up, I had no role models in lacrosse. Like, my mom's Black, my dad's white. My dad had no idea what lacrosse was. My mom did. And she was the only actual role model I had growing up for lacrosse. And, allowing, even if like we're not pro athletes, just letting us have our voice and like being that role model for younger kids, not even just girls, but guys as well. Like, I mean, they have like Kyle Harrison and all of them, but we don't really have anybody. Like, my head coach is the coach of PLL Brave, and there's not a single Black girl on that team. And she is always like my head coach is always advocating. And I think having those Black people in power and like as those role models, it'll just make everything so much smoother and will continue to help grow what the conversation is.
Could college students help with maybe going back to starting at where they're comfortable, maybe their old high schools? If they're a college student of color, could they maybe offer to interject themselves into that conversation and visit with, you can kind of pair it as coming back to my high school team, just to let you know I'm in college, but let's have a serious conversation. And plus it might help being somewhere around that 19 to 23-year-old age group, so that students may respond better. It's just a thought. How do you girls feel about it? Just graduated recently.
Yeah, my high school is actually doing that. I just got asked to do like a mentorship for my high school, since I'm still in, like, I'm in inner city Baltimore now, so I'm super close to my high school, and I have to go like in a couple of weeks and just talk to some of the girls who are going to be playing hopefully next year. So I think it's awesome. The mentorships are amazing. Me and my brother got asked to do it.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No.
First, I'm just taking notes. If anybody thinks I'm, doing different writing over here, taking notes what you say to get my own ideas. So living in Southern California and coaching there, there's in no way the same, but a similar sense of, I would guess, like being slighted in some way because it's like West Coast versus East Coast. And so in thinking about that and comparing it to having role models that have the same color skin, I think about when I have girls who come back into the area from the high schools locally, the 7, 8, 9, 10, like basically age 7 to age really like 13, they don't know if you want an NCAA championship or like you just played lacrosse. If you can pick up a stick and play, I think we need those premier leaders that are in positions of power. And then we just have this whole cohort of people that are going to do really, really well and will get the job done at more of the grassroots level. So that was the other point. Like we don't need to have, I think at kind of the earlier and younger stages, always the PLL or the WPLL professional player. It can just be someone that looks like them, went through the same high school, and it's like, here I am, and I can help teach you. And I have a coach for me, and she's Black, and it's also being out there and identifying those players and making sure those players stay in the game. And over time, if we, make a conscious effort of keeping those players in the game, then it'll become less weird or different, and it'll just become more the norm. And the more players then there are, then it always shares through friendships and families. And so I think that's an important point as well.
Holly, I completely agree with that. I go to elementary schools in our school district to teach lacrosse because it's still growing in Austin. And every time my husband and I, we both have the same job, we go together and we are like, oh yeah, well, and they always ask us, do you guys go to Vandegrift High School? And we're like, we don't, but that's like to them, the pinnacle of success would be a Vandegrift High School student. So it just shows that, we both had successful lacrosse careers in our own right, but they just want us to go to Vandegrift High School. So it's almost like if we can kind of form some sort of trickle down educational effect where, there are leaders giving great lessons and it's falling down into, like you said, the grassroots where, the youth can then learn from people that they think are the coolest people on earth because they're the most relatable, because they're in high school and it doesn't seem that far away to them. Meanwhile, a pro lacrosse player might just be like so over their heads. At least for the kids that I am in contact with, it's just like they have no idea what's out there.
So can we say, could a team, I kind of know the answer, but I'll throw it out there. Any of you coaching a team that has some players of color currently, no matter what level you're at, could you not just reach out to an underserved area of your community and tell your team, your whole team, you don't even have to just say your players of color. I think it helps the whole entire team. If they all have extra sticks or whatever, bring your backup stick. We're either going to or we invited over, Joe Smith Elementary School. They've never seen the game before. You just reach out to the school and said, hey, we want to come to your school after school ends for 45 minutes and just meet with your young ladies and just teach them this game. It's a great sport. And maybe just do it as a whole entire group, depending on your age group of your team. Now, I'm going to put Meg on the spot because I know her roster is very diverse. But, college kids, maybe you only send 6 over because they can handle it. But I'm thinking some of you are at the younger age groups in high schools and even middle school. If you can find an elementary student, you all hit it on the head. They don't care what college you graduated from. They don't care if you're a pro player or not. They don't see all that until, 15, 14 probably? You tell me. So I think initially, could that be a step in the right direction? Just one, improving diversity, but two, bringing, even your white players need to understand that this is the real world. It's not just Lily White in the entire world. Maybe just in their town where they grew up, but I think it'd be valuable. So Meg, I want to get your feedback on something like that. You're probably already doing it because you have such an interesting roster at Hartford there.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome group. So there's a lot of red tape around that. It is not easy to, I'm sure the club coaches in the group can speak on this. to get in with we've reached out to over 50 schools in the area, and to be able to give away our sticks. And then there's red tape on the university side. If you can't give something away unless it's been around, it's like no one, if I could not be a part of an association and just grab up all the sticks and just dump them on the field and give free lessons, that would be an easier process than what the rules are. I mean, we've done it with probably 4 or 5 groups, but it's easier to go in and teach like a STEM course than it is to teach lacrosse. They want volunteers, but they don't. There's all this waivers that parents have to sign off on. And waivers is like the easiest portion of it, but Connecticut's rules are insane, especially about us being able to go in and do a physical sport. So we recently, and I've been at Hartford for, this is going to my 5th year. I didn't have a team for the first year, but one of my players' parents called me out. We did one kind of free lesson kind of thing with the club team that asked us to, a very young team, and there was one player of color, and the mom came up to me and she was like, Coach Decker, you're better than this. There's no little brown girls running around the field right now. And I was like, I know, like, it was just like such a call out. And I'm so grateful for people who hold me accountable, because red tape's not an excuse, right? So it was very, very recently we've been able to work with schools that are a lot more diverse, but it is tough. We actually had to, because of COVID, cancel some of the stuff that we had set up this spring. But as a full-time head coach, the amount of time that it takes to run a program like Harlem Lacrosse, or have a program that wants volunteers, there's nothing like that exists in Hartford. So I'd have to create that and then have my players come volunteer. And so what ends up being easier is inviting those teams to come to Hartford, but then transportation is an issue, or the cost of getting there. Harlem Lacrosse has asked to bring players to our games, which is amazing. We do have the most diverse team in the country, which is incredible. And it's barely like, what is it, like barely 40% diversity. And it doesn't even feel right to be able to like make that a proud point, because it should not be even that far, right? So it's hard to do. And you asked about how do we get people at the top to have the conversations and invite people in. I think the biggest thing is what Zoe said. We're asking all these people to talk, and I told Matt this. I felt a little uncomfortable being asked to talk, being a white coach, because I was like, can my players say something? But it really, I heard diversity and inclusion is one kind of a cool thing. I was told it's like asking someone to the prom is diversity, but then asking them to dance was the inclusion portion of it. And I think that we're inviting people to the party, but we're not asking them to dance. And I think that that's a huge portion of what needs to happen. And I can promise you from experience, it's people are uncomfortable about the topic at up and ups. I'm sure Alyssa can speak to it too, but I have had plenty of conversations just about my team. And I'm lucky to have players who are willing to be put on the spot, but not every player of color wants to be the token player of color on the team. Like, that is not everyone's desire or role or what they want. And so there's a whole lot of nuances to that question, but I would say inviting people to dance would be the best thing. And Zoe hit it on the head with that one.
I definitely agree. And I think, you mentioned the kind of time commitment that it takes to really build something that's robust and like long lasting. And I think that's an important factor too, like having worked with kids and going to the same camp year after year, working with the same program. I think it is better and more effective to do multiple sessions than just this group of white players shows up and then gives you a stick and then they leave and you never see them again. And you don't really know how to play the game. Like, will you ever see a lacrosse game? Will you ever play it again? Or is this just a stick you're going to take home and it goes in your closet? So I think we have a lot of really great organizations that have taken it upon themselves to like build, Harlem Lacrosse, Denver City Lacrosse, like all these different organizations that are providing opportunities, and that's the blueprint. And then I think Zoe also mentioned a really great point of, the people that are the voices in the game need to be the ones that are speaking. And I don't know, what a lot of people's different thoughts are. I just know my own. And I'm lucky that for me, lacrosse is a hobby, and my Twitter account and Instagram were just something fun I did. So I have no ties. But, you know, I imagine if I was someone who had a contract with X company, and in the contract it said, you know, don't say anything inflammatory, or like, these are the guidelines of things you can post. If that's my livelihood and I'm the only Black person with that company, or one of two or one of three, like, how safe and secure do I feel saying something that could potentially like put me at risk to lose my job and lose my sponsorship, especially during a time like this? So I say that as someone who was like really, I was hard on a couple people about that. Like, I was like, I can't believe XYZ isn't speaking. Like, this is just beyond me. Like, I'm so mad about this. But then I realized, I was like, hold up, like, lacrosse is your side thing. Like, you're good. Like, you're going to be fine. But if this is someone's livelihood, is it fair for me to expect them to risk everything, even though it's the right thing to do? But we saw what happened with Colin Kaepernick. Like, at a lacrosse scale too, it's not like they can just jump to a different company or go do a different thing. Like, there's a lot at risk for them too. So that's just something I've been rationalizing, is I know who needs to speak up more, but is it fair to put that on them if lacrosse is their only way of life?
That's a very good point. And that brings me to my next question to the panel is, do people have to post on social media to show that they support something? I'm an old schooler. I say no, but I know you're all going to shoot me down because you're all younger, but I just, I'll use myself example. How I came, somebody asked me how I came about doing this idea is, I'm not a marcher. It's just not my thing. I knew that it wasn't something for me. And so during one of my runs, I just was like, I'd rather have a conversation with people. And then this idea just kind of flourished, and talking with some people that are smarter than me. They gave me the setting and the platform idea, and I ran with it. But your point, Tari, yeah, it's, I've heard the same rumblings that, oh, so-and-so should speak up. And I always say, I don't know, everyone has their own truth. And you're all on this call sharing your hearts right now, and this is your own truth. You don't have to know the answers right now. Not, you know, I don't feel that I should hold any of you to having a firm answer and a plan after you get off this call. I will hold you to just being open and having the conversation, because that's going to start the proper movement within our sport. So yeah, but I mean, social media is a great tool, a dangerous tool, and a weapon. So what are your thoughts?
I think people can almost underestimate the power of a conversation. And I know, like, my social media platform, I'm not Instagram famous, I can tell you that right now, but I think that what has really like pushed me and like helped me grow, especially during this time, is like what I wouldn't even think being a conversation. I coached the Heroes 2021 white team, and after like our first socially distanced practice,
just the white team, or are they all white? The way you said that. I don't want anyone.
No, so we have green and white. It's our A and B team. So technically, I guess the B team, but we try not to like.
Yes. Okay.
But regardless, after one of the practices, a couple of my girls were like lingering, and I was like, okay, guys, like we gotta go home. They were like, wait, like we want to talk to you, and I was like, okay, like what do you want to talk about? And they were like, well, what do you think about everything that's going on? Like, I feel this way, I feel that way, and like in that moment, it like hit me with like, one, like how much influence I think that you can have without like blasting whatever it is that you necessarily believe. And like we sat there and we talked, and like my dad coaches with me. I'm his assistant, and he's Black, and so him their entire life. And then there's me, and I just sat there and had an honest conversation with them, going back and forth. And they were honestly probably contributing more than I was, but I was watching them all talk about what was going on and what they could do to make it better. And like I just think in that moment it was just like, wow, like this is what we need to do. And I mean, I think I've built it in friendship with teammates. Like I've probably talked with Zoe more about our experiences. I think it's just those are the things that have really helped me grow. And so while I think social media is a beautiful tool, like I've learned so much on there that I wouldn't have expected to. I think it can definitely help with reach. I think having conversations like these and like having those uncomfortable conversations are just very powerful too. So I would almost promote trying to get the opportunities to talk with people maybe that you're not even that close with, or you wouldn't think to have that conversation with, because it's just been really eye-opening for me, and just learning from all experiences. As you said, like, no one's experience is the same, and so I've really found that to be helpful.
I agree with Grayson. I think the conversation, you know, they kind of talk about it even online, that the social media thing, it, you know, it had a lot of steam, and then even now you kind of see it starting to die out a little bit. And just the conversations, that's what's made me want to go out of my way to educate myself and do not so much the public posting, which again is a great way to bring light to stuff, but you know, educating yourself on just actual history of it, and you know, signing petitions and doing kind of like the groundwork that helps make a change, and conversations can kind of spark that, oh, I'd never thought about this before, like I should look into this more, and I want to educate myself, and I want to understand, you know, and it helps also kind of like with the empathy. And I've had conversations with people, teammates of mine that are Black, and kind of things that they've experienced and things that have been said to them, and how they have kind of been like undermined and that kind of thing. And it's just kind of made me step back and realize that, like, you learn a lot from people's conversations and their perspectives, and how it might be something that you've never thought of before. But it's like we said, I think Grayson said, like, everyone's story is different, and those conversations really do help you realize what goes on out there, and stuff you might not have thought about before.
Yeah, and I think somebody want to go before me, it's totally cool. Okay, I'll hit it really quick. I think part of that too is like people recognizing that it was way more than just a black square on Instagram or using a hashtag, or like even doing a 5-second donation. Like I had a lot of white friends that were like, donate here, donate this link, this organization, which is so impactful obviously, but also it's like, for me, it's like way more than a donation, or like you reposting something on your story. It's you like asking me about my Black experience in lacrosse, or like using other ways of social media right now. Like NCAA reposted an article that I had written a couple weeks ago. And like that for me was super significant, because the first 7 comments were negative comments, being like, all lives matter. It's just another athlete highlighting their Black heritage and not their white heritage. Like, crazy. Matt, can I curse, or is it crazy-ish? And I was just like, holy F.
Hey, no, we need to, you know, say what you need to say, because that there's no sugarcoating things. If you got to say the F word, you say the F word.
Yeah.
That's what it means, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just fucking crazy. That's how I feel. And literally reading those comments, I also was just like, you know, I wrote back and I was just like, listen, like, why is this, like, one person said, well, this isn't a lacrosse related issue, so I don't want to hear what you have to say. And I was like, actually, do you know how many Black women X coaches and players are out in the game that we love? There are practically 0. So thank you. My voice does matter, and please read my article. Like, I think that people need to know, and it's groups like that are representative of the lacrosse community, people that follow NCAA Lax. Like, those are the people that we need to hit and need to educate. So, you know, I'm with you guys. I think it's not all about social media, but I also think it is about amplifying Black voices on the social media accounts that matter.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just being super active on social media, it's where you can reach people the easiest and the fastest. Just think of if things go viral, if you have a high follower count, like those people are already there. Whereas I think it's just the best avenue to get the message out to the most people. But there are people that prefer not to put their things up there on social media, show their support in different ways. So I think it's just one avenue that works for people to share their message, but it's not necessarily the only one. And I think Holly, you mentioned this, or it might have been Katherine, but it kind of tapers off, right? So, you know, last week, 2 weeks ago, that was everything. All we were posting about was what was happening. and funny enough, someone DM'd me and was like, oh, like you're posting some sad stuff. Like, I hope everything's okay. And I was like, well, listen, I'm Black every day. So I'm just sharing a piece of my life with you. Like, these are things I think about every single day. This is my life. I'm just showing you, you know, in conjunction with the lacrosse stuff. So it's hard because eventually things go back to normal, quote unquote, or whatever normal can be. And for as good as it is, I don't know what other really great way to reach people is right now, especially since we're all inside. So at least for me, social media is what the best I can do. I went to a protest here in Atlanta after the murder of Rayshard Brooks. My mom was not happy about that. She was like calling me while I'm at, like, the Wendy's is burning. I'm trying to get away from the tear gas. And she's like, why did you go to the protest? Like, why would you do that? I was like, Mom, either I get tear gassed or I get away and I talk to you later. So yeah, social media is also my safest option, and she'll co-sign with that.
Something that
oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Helen.
I was just going to say, for youth and social media, as a program organizer, I'm already trying to work through some of my issues that I have with social media in general for youth. And so, you know, I have a Coach Holly account, and that's probably a separate conversation of I've gone silent on there for 6 weeks for a variety of reasons, this being a big one. But, you know, in general, before that, I really try to encourage like what you guys are talking about is conversations, because I get concerned about social media and youth and thinking that it's so surface layer. You can throw out anything. They think it's, as we all know, like you can put out something, you can be anonymous. And so I think with the young women that I'm working with, that might be the call to action or the introduction. And then there's got to be a very strategic and deliberate, intentional thought process of what goes beyond that for everybody that I interface with. And I think that goes deeper and is more long lasting, because, like, you know, the social media can change. You know, Instagram looks different than it did 10 years ago or 3 years ago, 5 years ago. So will it even be around in 5 years, you know? So they turn over so quickly. And I think the face-to-face, the interactions with players real time are really where we're going to get to the meat of issues, or have just awkward conversations as well. Not to take away from people posting, and that being really important as well, but it's got to be deeper and I think really intentional and deliberate as well.
Holly, I agree. I think, you know, especially with the youth, they struggle enough to have a conversation with an adult. I will never forget, I called one of my players on the way to practice last year because, and this is a high school player, because I was running late. And so I called her to help the team warm up. And it was like, you know, she picked up and she's like, hello. And, you know, it was the most strange thing to be talking on the phone instead of through text message. And I think, you know, it will build so much more character if we encourage these face-to-face, uncomfortable conversations where you don't need to know the answer. And, you know, it's really hard to be in that and to be uncertain. And, you know, some people are better than others. And I can't even say, I don't think I am great at it, but the only way you get better is by having more of them. And, you know, Mira, talking about the black square posted on Instagram, you know, when it was that day, you know, my husband and I were having a conversation of, you know, how many people do you think are just posting this because they see everyone else posting it and not knowing the true reason why? And, you know, I posted a black square, but before I did it, because we had this conversation, I'm like, I need to know exactly what this means, what it is doing. And instead of just, you know, you feel like you're a poser if you don't know. But so many kids just want to fit in and they want the acknowledgement that they're doing the right thing. And so I just, you know, social media is tough for me because you see what it does to the younger generation, and it's just their life revolves around it. And you know, the dopamine that they get from just the likes and the comments and all of that, it just, you know, it's hard because it can do so much damage while it's also amplifying so many great messages. So it's just like, where is that happy medium between the two?
The one thing I will say about social media, It's like a testimony about how effective it is. So this past season, I had a concern with how a ref was reffing a game, and I addressed it and said, I am concerned that possibly you might be having an unconscious bias to the players of color in the field on both teams. And I was chastised. I was called by some pretty high up coaches and told that my future in coaching was probably predicated on my apology to this ref for speaking up for my players. I was addressed very, very polarly opposite from the direction of this conversation is probably the most polite way I can put it. And this was about 2 weeks before George Floyd died. And the 180 that went through the social media posts and the conversations and my hope for the conversation with the ref wasn't to make her feel like she was a bad person. It was that no one else can speak up for my players except for me on the field. And it's my job. And I was hoping that maybe, like, there's no diversity committee for the IWLCA, Mira, I'm sure you know that. There's no avenue for our players or our coaches or any representation. There's not a single ref of color on the review board for film. I mean, none of that exists. And so my hope was to at least start the conversation. And I was quickly asked to sit down and take a back seat and apologize for my horrible behavior. That was actually the words that were used, until social media. And once social media started to talk about this and have a conversation, it was night and day. The first 4 conversations that were had with me to the last conversation that was had to me, where then I was then asked to speak about the topic and it was like trying to make me feel special for doing what was right. It was very odd. It was a whole situation. It was super weird. But social media was the number one reason that any of these coaches understood the language that I was even using. Like the term unconscious bias. They're like, you called her a racist. I was like, I 100% did not say that. But it just like the understanding, I think the exact term that was used when I addressed the comment was, I don't see color. And just that felt comfortable for her to say until 3 weeks later when we get social media posts saying, hey, it's not so cool to say that. People have a story. And so it was just very powerful what the social media messages have been putting out for our lacrosse world, specifically for women's lacrosse. And yeah, it's scary to post. I don't post too often. I like about hot topics because I like to learn a little bit before I open my mouth. But I do behind the scenes, and I just am super grateful for people who are a voice. Mira and Tari, you were actually 2 people who were a big voice for the people I was communicating with. And so thank you both for what you do on social media. But it was a game changer for how the situation was handled, and hopefully how the IWLCA and the CWLA, which is the Refereeing Association, will move forward for our players of color in the game. That's like, you know, got to see the firm action behind it, right? But conversations are going in the right direction, which wouldn't happen without social media.
And that all stemmed, you said, from you just doing your job as a coach. You're supposed to defend your players, you know, and question why a player's being officiated a certain way. As a referee, I find it kind of weird that an official would even take it the wrong way initially, like right away, and without thinking. But maybe that's just me because I'm a ref of color. But I just, it's an interesting story that you share.
Yeah. And I haven't even ever really thought, I mean, I think I saw a story about a football player, maybe it might have been a lacrosse player, who went through something similar, and the high school sports board was like, yeah, no, like there's no way, they called worse calls on you than they did the other team, like that doesn't happen. But when you mention unconscious bias, and especially within lacrosse, like comments that people have made of, oh, well, Black girls or Black people don't play lacrosse, or like, oh, you're actually pretty good for a Black person, or you went to high school, like they're not really good, but you're really good. Like, I'm sure those things play into the mind. Like, even me, if I meet a player that went to Marriott Ridge or played at Syracuse or played at, X school, like in my mind, I'm like, oh, like they're really good. Like I bet they're so good. And that can go either way too. So it's sad that a ref would have those kinds of thoughts and then people not rally around you. Like other coaches should be like, oh snap, like I should look at my roster and make sure my kids are fine and see if anyone on my team has been targeted and make sure that's not happening versus trying to chastise you for what's happening. And something else I struggle with too is I hate that it takes sad things happening for people to listen. I'm getting emotional, but someone else can talk. That's fine.
Take your time. Take your time. We can come back to you. You speak up whenever you're ready. Everybody has their own truth here, and that's gives me chills thinking about it as well. It's a very true story. It shouldn't be a tragedy for somebody to listen. We all, and again, I commend you. You're all listening. You're conversing. You're opening up your hearts. You're sharing your inner thoughts. I mean, that's how things get better. You don't just pull a trigger and react and say, "Oh, I'm not that way." It's like, well, how do you know? Have you ever really thought about it? And I think one of you mentioned the terms, the unconscious bias and all these terms. I think U.S. Lacrosse is often overlooked in this aspect, but their diversity training deck that they have is outstanding. We had the director of that program. Her name's escaping me because I'm looking at all your names. Ebony.
Is it Ebony?
Yes.
Ebony.
Yeah, she was on last week and she spoke up and I asked her to plug the program. She didn't, but it's a great program. I've taken the course. We're at the MCLA. I'm a leader in the MCLA, one of the leaders, I should say. And we're looking at instituting that in my conference as a requirement for all our players and coaches as a start. And then countrywide, we're strongly recommending it moving forward that each team take advantage of it. So that's a tool that's out there. Something came to mind too, all of you coaches, the network of lacrosse is what it is. We all know you can kind of get online, social media, and find somebody. It's not, I don't think it would be out of character right now to ask, because all you can do is ask. They can say no, yes or no, but ask players of color, people in my position, I'm in leadership roles from top to bottom, to come out to your program and just have like a talk with your players, no matter what age group they are. And you can work it out, kind of keep it on the down low. It doesn't have to be a major thing where the parents are like, why'd you have this conversation, but just start with asking. And if you run into trouble, get back to me and I'll find somebody in your area that'll come out. Because I have some friends all over that would, especially in your area, Meg, Dr. Fred Opie's up there, and Fred and I were roommates at Syracuse, and he's one of the ones that kind of spurred me to do this panel discussion. So, and I'm waiting for him to come on because he's just a wealth of knowledge where you just sit there and go, okay, yep. So.
So Matt, funny that you mentioned that, because Tari and Amari Pollard actually came on and spoke to my club, and I have to say, I'll give Tari a little shout out. It was like the most amazing thing, and talking to all of these youth players that admittedly Austin is not the most diverse city, and where we get most of our players from are just extremely wealthy, affluent, majority white schools. And so all of these kids just, I can't say what their lives are like off the field. I can't say the lessons that their parents teach them. I have no control over that. But just being able to have Tari and Amari speak to them and talk to them about things like microaggressions. And I think it was Tari that said that, microaggressions are racism with a bow on it. And, the number of parents that, texted me that and was like, that was an unbelievable, analogy. And, parents, players all watched it together. And, it just felt really good to know that they were able to connect with that many people. And, the lacrosse world is so small. It's big, but it's so connected at the same time. that, you know, it was so valuable. So it's like, you know, how many more kids can tell their friends that they had this conversation where they learned something, and, you know, spread the message that way about how to be an anti-racist and how to be inclusive to all races and, you know, LGBTQ and anything, you know, that might be different from the way that you and your family are. So it was, you know, shout out to Tari.
And you did that. Now that was a Zoom for your whole team, parents included.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Are you're down there working, girl.
I'm trying.
Zooming it up.
I'm gonna plug the podcast and say, you know, this whole group, like, if you want to, because I want to use, you know, I think historically my Twitter and Instagram have been like, yeah, I've been raising issues here and there, but I want to do it even more so, and I want to bring different voices, because when Amari and I did our podcast, like, even though like I spent 25% of the crying, but she held it together for the both of us. I think there was power in having someone else that I can have that conversation with, and I think we didn't really structure our conversation with Alyssa's team, but again, having someone else that you can kind of bounce your ideas back and forth from and validate the experiences that you've had, where like your white teammates or someone else might not really understand, but that person understands, or even, you know, a perspective, like having a white coach come and acknowledging biases. I mean, you know, just even the topic about the ref, like that would be, I'm sure people listening would just, their minds would be blown, because those aren't things that we think of. Like, these aren't discussions that we have. And yeah, I'm glad that the world is kind of shaking up and we're finally letting these topics out. So if anyone wants to continue the conversation, like, my pod is here. It's just an hour of us talking and hanging out. So you're all welcome to hit me up. Let's do it.
We've got a number of guests coming up. Yeah. Now, here's a good one for you. How do you embody diversity, equity, and inclusion in your day-to-day living? Excuse me. How do you embody diversity, equity, and inclusion in your day-to-day living?
My gears are turning. I just need to.
And you know, the answer could be, I haven't until the last 4 weeks, and now I'm trying to read books or looking at movies. You know, again, this is not to put you. You're not being put on the spot here. You're not trying to think of the right term, but all of you, you know, I know I have. I've done a lot of learning in the last 6 weeks. A lot of recalling of stories that my mother and father taught me, and relatives that are older taught me. And I have my kind of lane that I'm in, and another panelist used this analogy, and it's great because there's a number of lanes and they're all going to the same direction. So don't be, you know, we shouldn't be shy about being in one lane as opposed to another, because we're all trying to go the same direction.
Well, I'm kind of giggling because the amount of times I've heard I have Black friends be the answer to this question is actually hilarious. But I think that for me, I was pretty aware that women's lacrosse did not have enough Black women at the top for my players to look up to. And I do have Black friends. So I brought them in as speakers. Tari, actually, I think I reached out to you it was probably 2 years ago maybe. But I just, and I actually coached Anaya Flanagan, who was quite a standout at Florida. And I was trying to bring in a good friend of mine, ran track at Navy, and she's now coaches leadership. So not specifically women of color in lacrosse all the time, but just women of color who are badass people, and brought them in to speak to my team, making sure that I wasn't just bringing in white women to talk about leadership to my players. So I think that was a big thing that I have been doing since I started coaching. I wanted my players to have leaders to look up to outside the lacrosse world too. Fortunately, when I was hiring, I had to go through, like, there's not a single woman of color applied to be an assistant coach at Hartford in the 4 times that I've hired. And I went through the rosters of every Division I and high-level Division II and III program to look at which players are graduating. Would any of them be interested in applying? and would they come play? Mira, you were one of the people that I looked up on my list. I was like, I don't know if I can convince her. I'm good friends with Carrie. And I was like, think she'd come? So it's true. It's hard to find it, but there are ways to do it. And yeah, you might not be able to find role models in the lacrosse world, but they exist in the real world. That's the world is not all white. It's actually quite the opposite of that. And I think that I had to pull outside the women's lacrosse world specifically in order to be able to find people who my players could look up to, which is sad, but there are ways to talk about diversity and inclusion and equity. I had one of my good friends at school runs the diversity and inclusion program at Hartford. She came and spoke to our team multiple times, and just what you support and what you say and do, what you attend. The NAACP, reposting that on Hartford's, on the UHeart Lacrosse website, and reposting things that are about bigger than lacrosse, not just in this exact topic, but across the board. And we talk about how sports teaches leadership. We talk about how, we're raised to kick ass at our jobs when we graduate and be successful. And if we really believe that, we should be doing things as coaches, and we're a group of coaches here, that are teaching how to lead people who are different than you. And I think that that's why I recruit. I think the number one thing I tell all my recruits is I want you to learn how to lead. And number one thing we do is we have a team full of diverse people, diverse in their racial backgrounds, but diverse socioeconomically, diverse in their gender identities even, or their sexual identities, diverse in their faith backgrounds, diverse in their family makeup. And that's a part of why I started a program. We haven't won too much yet, but we will, I promise. But it is, you can thread it through. Yeah, Mira, if you ever leave Harvard, you know where to go. Very similar names, Harvard, Hartford. But it's true. You can do it in your everyday conversations, and that you kind of have to. You can't just one day decide this is what I'm doing. I mean, you can today and then continue it forward, but it's not just like a once a week kind of thing. It has to be your language. And it is its own language. And I'm constantly learning a better way to communicate about it. Matt, I think you and I were talking about that. I'm like, I'm not always sure what words to use. And every day I learn better ones. So I think that any type of niche, whether it's you're on a lacrosse field, we have a lacrosse language, right? We got a lingo, Lax Bros. Like that's probably the easiest thing. But every niche has a language, and diversity, inclusion, and equity isn't just a niche, but it does have its own language. And I think that getting comfortable talking about it like we're doing now is a huge part of living it every day.
Yeah, I think, Meg, going off your point, I think one great piece about DEI that's kind of missed too is the difference between equity and equality. So like equity being that if we all like need to see over a certain platform, but we're all different heights, we each are going to need a different height platform to see over like a ledge or whatever. And I remember like talking through that with somebody, and they were like, well, how does that relate to race and how we bring it into our lacrosse community here? And that's like adjusting based on background, on your race, on what you need. I mean, I remember like I was scholarship for my first club team. I was stipend because like the goalie equipment in and of itself, my mom was like, damn, like I hope this comes back to to make a difference in our lives, because we just dropped 700, hot dang. But I feel like, you have to adjust to what people need. And so I feel like right now what I'm trying to embody for DEI, and also there's a great part of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is also the B of belonging. Like, how do you belong in the entire sphere of like this sport that's predominantly white when you don't fit in? And so how do you bring other people into the space to feel like they belong and have a voice? So I think what I'm just trying to do is connect with dope people like you on the Zoom, keep expanding my voice, and also, trying to get the message out that that something's wrong in the sport and we need to change it. And I think that's a DEI initiative in and of itself.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like everything you guys are saying, I feel when I was growing up, I felt like I really had to be as inclusive as I possibly could with one race and then the other race, because being black and white, I was like, I don't even know where I belong. I don't know where I fit in. I was like, I'm trying to be this over here and I'm trying to be this person with my other friends. And it was, I like looking back at it now, I'm like, I tried way too hard to just not be myself and be this idea of what my white friends and then what my black friends, who they thought I was. And now growing up, I mean, still my two best friends are white and they are the best people I've ever met. They always ask me questions. They are always inclusive in their everyday lives. And it's made me want to be more inclusive and be like, I am who I am. Like, I can't help it. I don't care. Like, if I act more white with these people or act more black with these people, I am who I am. And being more in tune with myself makes me feel more inclusive and diverse.
Yeah, I think the belonging, I've never heard that before, Mira, and I think that's just something that like really struck with me too, because I think even with this conversation, just the title of it was the first time that I think I, in this general movement, thought about the implication of it in like my sport. Like lacrosse has become such a big part of my life, and like I think it's an active decision that I have to make every day when we talk about like living off of like diversity, inclusion, and all of those things. And I think that like speaking up is something that is necessarily sometimes sticky. I don't feel the most comfortable doing it because I think about like, well, I don't like similar to Zoe, but like the not feeling black enough or not feeling white enough. And it's like, it's this weird thing, but it's like that same sense of like belonging that anyone can feel. And I think just like choosing certain things, I think I was blessed to grow up in a very diverse community, but I think I assumed that diversity. It wasn't that I was like experiencing like really people coming together, but there were just a ton of different kinds of people. And I think that it's an active choice to then like interact with it. And I think that I've been able to work with really amazing organizations like Harlem Lacrosse, and like I just think that I want to continue to like make active decisions. I know, I think Tari said something about like making the choice to like speak to more people and do things, but I think like getting to work with these girls that call themselves lacrosse players, like they know that they're lacrosse players and they're not from the areas that like I grew up in, where you started playing lacrosse when you were 4, and like that wasn't my experience, but like they are just as a lacrosse player as the girl that picked up a stick before she could walk. And I think that getting to see that has just been something that has given me the choice to be able to choose to live that way. And so I think just recognizing those choices is something that I will continue to do, but I wouldn't say before, it's not something that you can, no matter where you live, how diverse it is, like where I grew up, I don't think I can just say, yeah, well, I've been here and that's how I live. I think it's just something we have to actively choose. And I have been very fortunate to have people like speaking that to me, so I've been able to realize it. But just like this, I think it was an eye-opener to like be like, well, it can be done in our sport. And I think that it's a great way to talk about it, because some people may not think that this sport is like it's not your life, but it is for a lot of people. And so I think that focusing on areas that we can is definitely one way to do that.
Anyone else? How about any, and you're already kind of touching on this, but what are micro changes you can make?
Holly had something.
Oh, wait, Holly, you're on mute. Hold on. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Cool. I was in the dark over here. You might have lost me. So in answering the question, I had an assistant coach for 6 years who was Black, and she was a professional basketball player, never played lacrosse herself, and just brought so much to the table in terms of game knowledge. I mean, you're a basketball player, you're going to be a great lacrosse player. If she had the chance, she would have been a stud. And we've never actually had this direct conversation, but what she brought to the table, you know, when you think about hiring someone as a coach, especially when you get into the competitive high school, you're thinking of expertise, right? And it was more powerful for me to have someone who was different than every single player on our team than to have someone who had the same lacrosse experience that I did, essentially. And I think it's really important not only to talk about putting phenomenal Black female role models in front of Black young women so they feel inspired. Also putting, great Black role models in front of the large majority of lacrosse players right now who are white, and look at that and say, that's great too. Of course, that's a path. And I think that's just it's not embedded right now. And so creating those opportunities, and I think about the recent article from US Lacrosse from Lauren Davenport and, how much effect she was able to, how much coaching she did. And I don't even think she had a college level, experience, but, putting her in front of youth is so important. And from my assistant coach, again, it was important to have her in front of players to show that it's not just white women who are coaching this sport, and a lot of white men too. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
I think that's an interesting point that you brought a basketball. I mean, basketball is always something I've told basketball players they'd love lacrosse because I think it's a natural progression, but I've never talked to a basketball coach. I've talked to basketball refs to ref lacrosse and they've done well. But that's an interesting point to just bring in a coach, because coaching is coaching, and you don't need 5 people that know the X's and O's. You need maybe 2, one on each side of the ball, but that third person then could be an actual coach and help you a lot more than you think. That's eye-opening to me, Holly. That's a good move. All right, I'm gonna start winding it up here, but I think let's see. Let me pick this question here, because this is pretty appropriate for all coaches in general, not just women's, but coaches are busy and overtasked at times. What are the 3 steps or changes a coach can take to be more inclusive, more specifically to increase the number of players of color in their programs and teams? I mean, we've been talking about it, but does anybody have any specific things they've tried or seen that's worked with their groups they're working with, or what worked for you as a player?
I remember when I was getting recruited, my very first time on a club team was my sophomore year of high school. And I remember getting emails from through my coaches, to me, and they all said her athletic ability was amazing. Athletic ability. And it said nothing about my lacrosse ability. And I mean, obviously when I was getting recruited, I was like, this is insane. I never thought I'd play lacrosse in college. I was like, this is so cool. All these schools are interested. And now looking back at the emails, because I wanted to read them, I think it was ridiculous that it was all about my athletic ability and not my actual lacrosse ability. I played midfield, and a week ago, I did an interview with Angie Benson through Blackster Blog, and she asked me the question of, when you got recruited, what position did you play? And I said midfield, and she was like, was it because you were black and fast, or was it because you were actually good at lacrosse? And that took me back for a major second, and I was like, probably because I was black and fast. I was the fastest girl on my team, but we also had a lot of super fast white girls on my team as well. And I think if coaches are looking for, obviously some kids, I was not very good at lacrosse. My athletic ability was my main reason for actually getting recruited. And I think if coaches take those types of verbiage away and just say, we are very interested in her, we would like to talk to her, I feel like in the long run, for those girls and guys as well, it'll have a better, not mental effect on them, but it'll make them feel okay, they're interested in me, and that's it. Not because of this certain asset. And I think definitely going into different types of schools and looking at maybe the lower teams that aren't as good, because we didn't have an A or a B team. It was just one whole team. So I know a lot of recruiting, I coach the A team. No coach ever goes to the B team. They always are at the A team games. And there's some girls on the B team that should be on the A team, but our coach likes the certain girls she's seen. They've been on the team for years. And I think that's the biggest thing, is changing the verbiage, changing what you're looking for, and just giving those other teams a chance as well. I think that would also change the recruiting pool.
Yeah, we've had 2 different panelists say that same exact thing, that why is it the player is a black player and they're athletic? Why aren't they just a good lacrosse player? You know, it doesn't, it's not, oh, that black player is good. No, it should be number 25 is good. Or that 25 and their team is killing us in midfield. Somebody do something about it. It shouldn't be just the black player, because then you'd be saying, well, that white player is good. Does that make sense? No. So why would you say black player or that Hispanic player, or that Asian player, or the Indian player, whatever it is? Why aren't they just a number if you don't know who, obviously if you're coaching against them. And that's something as a coach, you can correct your players too. You can just, right in the middle of a game huddle, you can just say, what do you mean black player? That's number 45. That's how you address it. Would you want someone calling you a white player? And just move on with your, and just say it and then move on. And then maybe after the game, you can say, hey, girls, come together. This is not what we do here, or something. Just
yeah, I think that's super ingrained in people. And I was listening to Julie Foudy's podcast, and she had, it's a really good podcast if anyone's looking for one. And they had Crystal Dunn on it, and they had talked and made the comparison, and she had a similar experience where, she was only talked about how athletic she was, and they say, a white quarterback is smart and tactical, but a black quarterback is, athletic and just explosive, and all the different kind of verbiage. And it's interesting that it's just, ingrained in so many people. And even down to, and I say this to our high school board, our logo is that we're the Vipers, and it drives me insane that we call ourselves the Lady Vipers. And I'm like, it's not the male Vipers. Like, I get so annoyed by it. And I'm like, we don't call the men's team the male Vipers, but yet we're still promoting that we're the Lady Vipers. And, it's a different topic, but it's just, that this is a normal thing and we're just living with it.
Yeah, that's one thing about sports that just, I don't want to say pisses me off, but I remember in high school, it was $3 to watch the girls' games at 5 and $5 to watch the guys play at 7. And it bothered me back then, but I couldn't put my finger on why. And they got to practice on the game field sometimes, but we had to run 2 miles to the middle school down the street to go practice. And finally, when I could put 2 and 2 together and be like, that's sexist. Also, they kind of suck. Why they should be paying us? That's not even $5 in my pocket. First of all, our parents are out here hustling to sell these snacks and these burgers to raise money, because why can't we all just charge $5 or charge no money? Why are they charging for high school lacrosse games anyway? That's a whole nother story. But yeah, the 3 versus 5 thing always bothered me. And the Lady Tigers, Lady Vipers, Lady Hornets, whatever, it just doesn't need to be a thing. So I definitely agree with you on that. Me too.
I was going to say, I don't know if you know more, Meg, because you're actively recruiting, but one thing that came to mind during this, and I don't think I know enough to say that this is how it goes for sure, but I know as a club lacrosse coach that's where you get recruited, and as a player, that's where I got recruited. And I'd be interested to see, comparing to other sports, I'm pretty sure in basketball, there'd be coaches at my games at high school. And in lacrosse, I think maybe one time there was a coach at one of my high school games. And I think that if we could almost, and I know that college coaches do a lot and they have a lot on their plates during that time, but if you were able to get out in season is hard, obviously, but maybe even just film wise, seeing kids play at their high schools, or high schools that you go to, where they are, the population of that school, and you could be seeing a completely different game of lacrosse. And I think we go to these club tournaments out in wherever you're traveling to, if you have the money to do that and the money to participate in that activity. And I think it would be really beneficial to just get out there. My high school, I went to Wild Lake High School, and my first day of lacrosse, there were 5 girls that had never played before, but they are so athletic, and they got the idea of the game. And then by the end of their 4 years, they were lacrosse players again. And I think my school was incredibly diverse, and I think there are plenty of girls that could have gone on to play, whether it be D3, D2, honestly, maybe some D1. But I think that the hope is to get them playing earlier, but there are a lot of people in high schools, I think, like that they have to have a team, and so we make one, but they're not all getting that opportunity to play clubs. So I think coaches could help with that, just getting out and seeing more games, but I don't know how practical that could be.
I will say I have maybe at one point said that coaches who don't have a diversity are doing lazy recruiting, because there are tons of players of color who are really good, and if they're not good yet, they might not have had the coaching. I know that. So I was really fast, really athletic, but terrible at lacrosse. I didn't have the coaching, and Jen Adams taught me how to play lacrosse, and that was in college. Like, she truly taught me how to play, and that my personal experience helped me think about players differently. I think not because of color, but just looking at high schools that maybe didn't have prominent lacrosse programs. I recruit from track meets, I recruit from basketball teams, and I recruit from local high school games because I played 1 year of club when I was a senior. Checkers had just started a team and I didn't get picked up on any other one. Like I said, I wasn't good. I was just fast, and but I got good, and it does change the way you think about recruiting, Grayson. You have to look at high school teams, and it's like I said, it's lazy. Like when you go and you just look at the top club teams from the like most common areas of lacrosse, that you know what you're gonna get. Yeah, you're gonna get good players, but there are very few high school players that are good enough to play college lacrosse right now. I don't care if you're the best in the country. I put you on a college lacrosse field, the high level D1, you're not gonna be good enough. You need to learn. Like every single player who's playing high school lacrosse right now needs to learn when they get to college. So it's either lazy coaching, like you're not gonna put the time in to teach someone how to play or get them better. You don't want to coach them, you just want X's and O's. I know this is a little extreme, but like it takes a coach to coach, and it takes a recruiter to actually recruit. Like my 21 class right now, I was looking over it and I was like, this is probably the least diverse class I've ever had. And so like, I got to go back to the drawing board, and it was tough because it cut out we couldn't watch any high school games this year. And it's exactly where we find people who are not playing on the club teams that are super expensive to play on. And it takes being creative, but it's not like it's not possible or these players aren't playing. And all the time I hear like there's not enough opportunity for players of color, which is true, but we're also not capitalizing on the players of color who are actually playing the game and crushing it. Like, I think to your point, you had teammates who could have done a really nice job in college, and it takes conscious effort to improve the game of lacrosse. And I use that word on purpose because the game does need a hell of a lot of improvement. And I believe it comes in the form of diversity and the inclusion portion of that, which I think as a coach to recruit, you have to be inclusive in your mindset. I mean, think about, this is very business oriented, but HR departments, say you're hiring for a position, how many do you have to have? Certain number of male candidates or number of female candidates? You have to have men and women of color. Like, why is that not a standard for us as coaches to look at everybody who's playing the game, not just accept the person who walks in the door first? And I think that, yeah, it takes conscious effort, but and attention behind recruiting for sure.
Just to add to that, I think you see a lot of, this year will be different given the circumstances with the pandemic, but, you see a lot of schools be done with recruiting come first week in November. And that's always interesting to me, coming from a non-traditional area for lacrosse, where, our players might not be as great as the players that are on Long Island that have grown up playing their entire lives, but they very well may just end up being as good if you give them the opportunity to play at the next level. But I guess it's just, I'm kind of losing my train of thought here, but it's interesting that coaches rush their classes. And I think, Meg, you make a good point there, where it's like, you have to actively recruit and you have to, not just take the first people that you get on campus and give them the offer because you think they're the best. And, you know, it may not be the easy route, but what's the right route, I guess. And, you know, we don't have college coaches on here to ask, but I always, being here, which has been different than my past, growing up on Long Island, but being here where it's not traditional, it's interesting where it's like you're calling up schools and they're like, oh, we're done. I'm like, what do you mean you're done? What if you find someone in May? Are you just going to say no? Like that, you know, it is interesting to think about.
Recruiting is like a whole nother 2-hour conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a bummer that a lot of kids do lose that opportunity. I had a girl, and I run more of like a developmental team. I coach for a club that travels, but I run a team that's just kind of kids don't want to play, but really can't afford to play on those elite teams. And I've only been I haven't done it a full year yet, but I had a girl in January approach me, and she was a senior, and she was that I've realized that I really enjoy it and I want to play in college. And having to tell her that most coaches were not just done with her class, but even if she were a grade below in January, that would have even been a stretch for her then. And you know, a lot of the schools she applied to had club teams, and I encouraged her to look at that stuff. And I think a lot of the schools that she was looking at, they weren't doing applications anymore. But it really is sad that a lot of kids with some of the recruiting miss out on opportunities just because they don't realize how good they are. They've never had a coach push them. They don't realize their potential and realize that is an option at Division 1, 2, or 3. And Meg, I think that's so awesome how you're saying you recruit from all different kinds of track and basketball and all that. Just because, you know, a lot of kids are multi-sport athletes, and I think that that's something that as a coach you like to see. It shows that kids are well-rounded, and you know, they could completely miss an opportunity for something like that. So yeah, I know, Matt, you said the recruiting thing is a whole nother conversation, but you know, I hope that there's something that we can do, and I'm glad that we're continuing this conversation about it and how we can get these kids that opportunity. You might not be able to financially afford that kind of thing for years and years and miss out on that.
Yeah, no, I think recruiting, having gone to college before, recruiting was a big thing. You know, we didn't have the internet then. That's how old I am. So it was, you know, you actually wrote a letter to a coach. The coach actually wrote you a letter back. And that was like, that's how it went, you know. So, you know, I say about recruiting now, knowing what I know, is that one, most parents, and it's not a knock on them, but they have no idea what the process involves, number one. And that's a big problem because that's capitalized on the other side of it coming from the schools and program organizers. You know, I don't fault anyone for running a business and making a dollar. That's their choice, you know. I always had a problem with any event, though, that really doesn't seek to educate their consumer on the recruiting process. Instead, you know, I run tournaments, but I've never run a recruiting tournament. I have coaches all the time. Why don't you run a recruiting tournament? Your tournaments are so good. And I can't because I said, we wouldn't, it'd be half the time not on the field. I need to talk to parents. I want you coaches to really address parents and explain to them that this is how recruiting works. This is what we mean by recruiting. We're bringing 60 players. It just means you're recruited. Doesn't mean you're going to get a scholarship. And when you get there as a freshman, you go to fall ball and you're one of 40 or 50 kids and everybody's an All-American high school from wherever they are. And, you know, all these things that really come to play. And the kid sits there and goes, well, wait a minute. I was the best player in Smithville or wherever. Now I'm just a number on the field, you know, and I don't even know, I got recruited. Doesn't even I'll make the team, but I don't like the school. So what am I doing here? You know, and it's that's why I say recruiting could just on and on and on. And it baffles me because I always question, like, whose job is it to educate that end consumer, the parent and the player, whose job is it to educate them? Is it the recruiting event? Is it the recruiters? Is it both? You know, that's a sticky one right there. But I think there's opportunities. Kat, you mentioned it. The WCLA, it's the Women's Collegiate Lacrosse Association. It's all the college club teams. They have over 250 teams, I believe, that are opportunities to play at good universities. And NCAA athletics is not right for everyone. If your player can't come to practice the 5 days a week or whatever that you have scheduled, or they can't seem to stay focused, how the hell are they going to do an NCAA program? You know, that requires your studying, your weightlifting, your training, you know, all that stuff. And that's the kind of thing I think as a coach, the coach needs to be practical with the player and the parent and say, yeah, they're good, but NCAA is a whole different level. You know, you can't be whatever it is you're doing once a week that you miss practice because you want your kid to do all this rounded out stuff. That's not what college is about at that level. So I could go on and on and on about recruiting. I love it. It's a necessary evil. It just needs to be worked, and everybody knows it needs to be worked. It's just how does it get to be done? So, I think we've come to a good spot here. You know, and you can probably tell from this conversation that we could all take a 5-minute break and keep going for another hour or two if we had the time. I'm happy to have any and all of you back at any time. And like I said, you can use this video however you like. You're the 5th in the series right now, and they're all up on the website. You can have your people watch them and you can support them. And I just want to give each of you, we'll go around the horn, give each of you, a few seconds to say your final thoughts. And I hope you've all made new friends here and you stay in touch and, reach out to each other, reach out to me. Any of the other panelists have all been willing to have conversations and help in the different regions that they're in. So I'm going to start with you, Holly. And let's see, you got to unmute. There you go. And your final thoughts, Holly.
Matt, well, thanks for having me. And thank you all for listening and sharing. I know for me, the last 6 weeks have been a lot of just listening and absorbing. And I'm actually hopeful that and looking to this conversation to kind of be a springboard and the spark for me to take more action instead of continuing to absorb and process. And so I appreciate, you all helping me in that process, and look forward to staying in touch and maybe having you, Tari, or Mira. You coach one of my girls, Arcade up at Hartford. So talking to you about her and just connecting, because I think through sports we create shared experiences. And I think I thought about this a lot. The black and white experience is not shared, but we can share more experiences through sport. And so I think lacrosse is such a great opportunity to bring people together. They get on the field through lacrosse, and then we can have some bigger conversations. So thanks again, Matt.
All right. Zoe.
I mean, going off of that's kind of hard. But basically just always, especially coaches now, always remember that not every Black, Asian, whites player, experiences are the same. And so sometimes going at it the same way for every person isn't always going to work, and that's fine. It's not on you. You are doing what you can do. And I mean, I think what everyone's doing in society is amazing, because like I said to our team, we had a Zoom a couple of weeks ago. I was 10 years ago, no one ever would have asked me any type of questions that they're asking me now. And it's awesome. And I love it. And I love everything that's going on, and just keep doing it, because that's all that matters.
Well said. Well said. Kat.
Well, thanks for having me, Matt. This was an awesome experience. I really enjoyed listening to all of you guys. And like Holly, I was kind of just jotting some stuff down. I feel like I've really learned a lot. And I feel like it really kind of got gears turning. I have a lot of things that I'm thinking about, and a lot of ways that I want to challenge myself to really step up and help the situation, address the racism and all this, and growing all that. So thank you for having me, and thank you all for listening to me.
All right. Grayson.
I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. I think it's been an overwhelming past couple of weeks where I found myself probably asking, like, what can I do? And I think that if anything, through this conversation, I feel inspired by all of you guys just to do a little bit more and like what I can in my sport and with the people around me. And I think this is just an awesome thing to be doing. So I'm really grateful to have been able to talk and learn from all of you. And I'm excited to see how these conversations keep going. So thanks.
All right. Where are we? Allison. Or Alyssa, excuse me. I just said Allison. Oh my God.
I was like, is that me?
I'm getting tired. Okay.
It's okay. It's all good. Allison works.
Allison, whatever. Come on.
Yeah, well, first I want to say thank you. And, I've found so much value in having conversations like this. Just listening to, Black people's experiences, Black lacrosse players' experiences, and, things that probably went way over my head, being a white lacrosse player. And, as much regret as I have for allowing that to go over my head, just acknowledging it now and, learning how to better be an ally and an anti-racist is, what I am dedicated to be doing. And, I have a lot of players that, I coach, and I want to be able to be that person where they can, turn to me and learn from the way that I act. And so I take that very seriously. And I think that just being on calls like this is a way to learn from you guys. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
All right. Tari.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always great to meet new people and have deeper conversations. I think, especially being in quarantine and social distancing, the world isn't fully open yet, and maybe it won't be open for a while, but it's nice to continuously have deep conversations with people and make connections. So I'm glad that we're talking about these things, and lacrosse can't hide behind the veil of, oh, we have these programs that are doing these things. It's like, we have the programs, but we also need the conversations, and we need everyone actively dedicated to making change. So yeah, I'm glad that we're moving down that path.
Beautiful. Who we have missing? Meg?
Hey, yeah, I echo, everyone's kind of covering it, but just grateful to be a part of this group. I will give you a heads up that now that we've all been in a conversation, I will capitalize on these acquaintances and be asking you guys to connect with both my players and for future things that are going on. You're now on the spot, so if you get a text from me, I'll pretend like we've known each other a while. But I think that Maya Angelou said it the best. She was like, do your best until you know better, and then once you know better, you're responsible to do better. And I think that that's what these conversations do. They teach us to do better. And I learn every time I open my ears to listen. And I think that I'm just super grateful for you guys for speaking up. And I encourage you to do it more. And I encourage you to invite people to dance, not just invite them to the party.
Right. Let's dance. I like it.
I'll freaking dance, Meg, all day long. Let's go.
Let's go, Mira.
Yeah, I think just shout out to everybody on this panel. I think you guys are wicked cool. Let's collab in other ways, and shout out to you, Matt. You freaking rock, man. From the daughter of another bald-headed Black man. Love that. Always gotta get some shea butter on that ish.
I'm not throw that in there. I'm getting hot. Starting to
So yeah, love to see it. And I think just one last note from me is just that belonging piece. I think like keep bringing different people into this game. And also like harping on this isn't a political issue for the coaches out there that are listening. Like it's a human rights issue, and do better in your day-to-day movements with pulling that forward and pushing this movement forward. So yeah, you all rock. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that really brings it home. And again, I appreciate all of you taking the time. And I know how this is difficult at the beginning, but you're all pros now. I mean, you've passed the course, so go out there and spread the love and keep it going. I'm still looking for actual players, ages 18 to like 22, because I want to do an all players panel. So if any of you have a player that you think would like to learn and speak up, white, Black, doesn't matter. I think that'd be really cool for all of us adults to hear from actual players that are, younger in the game and where their minds are at. But, and you can email us at ot@emwf.org. And then we'll also, Tari, I'm going to get your podcast link. We'll get that put up on the end of the video here. And anybody else wants to plug anything, we'll edit that into the end there so people know where to reach you guys. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you to all those that are watching. And we'll be back next Wednesday night, same time, with another conversation. Pose a question to the panel by emailing us at ot@emwf.org. We'd love to hear from you.